Constance, I think it makes the most sense to begin with you. This is your first feature, and maybe somewhat predictably, I'm interested to know sort of what the writing process like entails on a first feature like this, especially one that's like as deeply personal, you know, as this one. But I'm also especially curious to know about how you were thinking about the structure of the film in writing the script.
So I would, wow, okay, I was I would say that the first draft began around 2019, 2020, and in those, I think, first iterations, it wasn't as, I guess, like loose as it is now, and it was much more about a character who had a very clear sort of hero's journey that was centered mainly around Amy's character. And then I think throughout the writing process and figuring out what the film was really about to me, it changed shaped and it became the sort of deviation into the three characters. And I think from that point on, the structure, of course, changed with it. And something that I really wanted to do was have the first part really be Dee Dee's act. And because we lose her kind of 30 minutes in, I wanted to make sure that the rest of the film felt like it held on to her spirit, and it still felt like we can feel her impression on their lives throughout acts 2 and 3. Yeah.
It almost gives it the aspect of like a ghost story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then I mean, the film like abounds with remarkable performers. I mean, our audience perhaps will most immediately recognize Lee Kang-sheng from the many Tsai Ming-liang films we've shown here, but it's really top to bottom, including the performers here. So could you tell us a little bit about how you populated the film with your characters?
That's like the best part, I think, of making a film like this. And I think something that was so integral with incorporating Hsieh and Murielle was that they brought so much of their own, I think, experiences and life to these characters that, you know, in some way, shape, or form, when you write a film like this, it's kind of flat on the page, right? And for them to bring in so much love and I think understanding of the character and pushing it beyond what I had written was part of the collaborative process. And I think for me, like Hsieh was someone who I had watched so many films that she's been in, especially Nina Wu, and I thought that that was so spectacular in her performance, and that really really struck me. And with Murielle, that was a very special find, I must say. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's your first time acting, right? Yeah. In this movie. Yes, so it was a really amazing experience working with her.
She trusted a random stranger on the internet, so kudos to you.
Yeah, and then you know, maybe we could sort of elaborate on the way that you work with the actors, because you know, the film, it's often like you're striking this balance sort of between like maybe like a certain naturalism, but then also kind of the melodrama that's inherent to the subject matter, and maybe all three of you can talk through how you sort of like work through that.
Do you guys want to start first?
No, you go first.
I mean, you know, the script, I would say, was originally written in English. And so when the script was brought to Lee Kang-sheng and Hsieh, we had basically worked through we went over in rehearsals each scene of what the emotional beats were. And from there, they brought in their own natural dialect and their own natural dialogue to make the scene feel a lot more lived in. And then when we took the scene and we shot it, it became a different kind of writing as well. So the sort of writing that changes from script to rehearsals to what we shot was always evolving. And I mean, I guess like with the material, because it is emotional, I really wanted to make sure that it never felt like it was not real, and that it always was grounded in the character and what they were experiencing in real time.
When I first read the script, I was overwhelmed because I really like the character, centers on Amy from a female director's point of view. And then I was surprised to know actually I share a lot of comment with Connie because I was also reading many articles about Alan Hasbach shooting and Asian hate crimes, and also I wonder, how those women, their lives were before I, met her. And then after I met her in New York City, and we just talked a lot in the beginning, and then I was also going through a grieving process in my stage of my life. So it's really coincident that I received this film. And then I played quite a lot characters, which were illegal immigrants in my previous films, and mostly we shot in very long takes and acting with non-professionals. And so for this film, it's really special for me that it's my first time to act and in the U.S. and then work with the U.S. crew. And for me, the difficulty is that I don't understand how Amy feels like because I've never actually lived here. So the challenges for me is that I came here 2 weeks before and we rehearsed, and then also tried to revise some of my dialogues with Lee Kang-sheng. And then the rest of it is like I love to hang out with my colleagues, and then I learned the professional massage skills, the real massage skills from my masseuse, and then I hung out with them, and also I worked in a restaurant, and that's how I step by step to build a character. Yeah, and then the rest of it is like I try to find the authentic, the real emotions on set. Yeah.
And there is melodrama, and this is like an impossible situation I've never lived through, but there's also so much relevancy in these characters that I think we can all find within ourselves. Like they're masseuses and they went through a tragedy, but they're also sisters, they're friends, they are watching K-drama. There's like so many little tidbits that I think we all put ourselves in, and that made it feel more real, for me at least. Yeah.
And did you have any like impressions of like when you were working with Constance on your character as a first-time actor? It would actually be interesting to hear like what you made of the bewildering process of acting in a film.
I came in with zero expectations, but I thought, like, even in such a small, cramped space, like, Constance gave us so much space to just, not improv, but just feel. Like, we would be in rehearsal or doing the blocking, we'd do the lines, and then she'd be like, okay, that, but, like, do it another way. Or, like, say that, but, like, feel a different emotion. And it felt really good to put a bit of yourself in there. And that was magic. I think all directors should be like that. So now I have that's my expectation now.
Right on. Yeah, Constance, I'm interested. Of course, I want to know about like shooting and Flushing, and it occurs to me that like in the new director's context, we're often talking to filmmakers who, they're like shooting something where they grew up. They're bringing like the apparatus of cinema to like their home in a way. And of course that's happening here, but then it's also New York City, and it's like famously a very chaotic, crazy place to make a movie. So maybe could you just tell us a little bit about sort of the experience of like bringing all this to Flushing?
Yeah. Hectic, I would say is the first thing that kind of comes across. But it was also, I haven't lived in Flushing since I was like 17, so to kind of go back there and to revisit a lot of the spots when I was doing location scouting, all of that felt very inspiring, of course, but it also made me feel like I needed to reconnect with the community that lived and worked there, and we're really mindful of what we were doing, especially when we were scouting these spaces, how that sort of foot traffic would impact, I think, the communities that we shot and were working in. So first of all, that was something I was thinking about. And I feel like a lot of my decisions to shoot in these specific locations had a lot to do with, it always goes back to the characters and like what they were seeing on a day-to-day basis. And that was sort of like the route for how I decided to choose locations, what sort of locations we were working in, and like all those specificities how they were meaningful, I think, to the specific characters. Like that was how I was working in thinking about those site specifics.
Maybe I'll ask another question or two, and we can see what the audience wants to know. Yeah, I mean, I have to ask about the visual approach in the film and your collaboration with your cinematographer. Yeah, it's striking throughout, and like at times it reminds us of some films, but other times it's clearly its own thing. So maybe could you talk about this collaboration but actually it strikes me that's related probably to shooting in Flushing, because you probably had to come up with some creative solutions about how to shoot certain things.
Creative solutions, and also, I think for a film like this, I had written for it to be shot in this way. You know, whether that was a good or a bad thing, it was the choice, I think. And so with normally my DP, we had worked together before, and he had shot my thesis film when I was still in film school, and we have like a working dialogue, and I think our tastes are similar, and we basically worked through the script, and we would shot list and talk about the overarching sort of visual language of the film and what we were trying to capture. And a lot of times that was about the impression, I think, that the film aims to leave when you leave this, right? What sort of frames stick with you, and how does that essence sort of continue and you feel that? So that was the goal. And I think with shooting in a short time span with 18 days, there weren't many options to do too many camera setups. So I think this specific shooting style was advantageous to what our tools were and what we were afforded to make. But that, you know, creates a different sort of pacing when you're shooting the movie, and a different sort of, I think, intellectual space when you're working with blocking, and how do you keep a scene dynamic like that?
All right, let's take some questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone so that we can all hear you. We'll start right over there.
Hi, just want to say thank you so much for creating such a beautiful film. I'm very curious about why you made the decision to choose to have Dee Dee Longfor in the last setting be placed in Baltimore.
Hello, thank you for staying, for your question. So Baltimore is also one of the areas where there's like a really large Chinese community. And so that's why we decided to have it in Baltimore and the significance of it. And the idea, I think, for that specific location and like the decision for the characters to travel there at the end was really about how do they continue in the spirit of Dee Dee, essentially. And maybe I'm getting your question wrong, but that was the decision of why the two characters end up there as well.
First off, thanks, Constance. I really love that movie. You briefly mentioned kind of how you source the lead actors, but I want to kind of know what specific characteristics or qualities you're looking in each role.
What specific qualities was I looking in each role? You know, I think with Amy and with Keshi, I knew that there was, I think strength is the first thing that comes to mind, and this is a character that is a survivor. You know, that's why she keeps moving. She's always solving problems. She's a caretaker for me. And when I had met Keshi, there's a grace and there's a strength to her, and I felt deeply connected to her, and I had watched her movies, I watched her interviews, and I felt like this was a role that could fit her well, and so that's how I reached out to her. And with Murielle, there was so much light and joy and warmth, and that was a character that I had written for Josie, and so when I met Murielle, I was like, this is a beautiful pairing.
Hi. I think that a lot of the beauty of this film comes from those like really long, beautiful takes, and I was just curious what it was like in the editing room, dealing with the pacing and kind of seeing it come to life and piecing together those long one-shots. I was just curious about that.
Thank you for your question. Editing for me is always the most difficult process, I think, of putting together the film, and It was extremely hard, but also easy in the same time because there weren't so many shots to choose from. But we had several feedback screenings and we had really strong, great notes from people that we had sent the cut to. But it was really about what makes for the right timing and what makes for sort of right pacing. And working with my editor, Caitlin Carr, she was incredibly patient with me. And I think honestly, going through several iterations of beginning the scene in one part, ending the scene in another, and keep playing, I guess, with those iterations was kind of how we landed here. But there was so much, I think, hard work and restructuring and taking out scenes completely that went into the edit.
Actually, I have a follow-up question on that. It seems to me that, like, in the editing room, that could be the space in which, for you, like as a filmmaker, but also as someone who watches films, maybe associations, or the films that you associate with your actors probably come to fore, and you're like trying to avoid like close resemblances and so on. So with Hsieh, maybe it's like films she made with Midi-Z, or with Lee Kang-sheng, with Tsai Ming-liang. So I'm curious to know like how conscious you are like when you're navigating that process of the fact that people will be reminded of these things.
Yeah, and I think that's why editing is so personal to me, because at the end of the day, the film that you're watching is going to be in my time. It's kind of like, of course, like alongside with the editor, but it's kind of like how I feel time. So that creates, I think, a situation for me that's quite vulnerable sometimes, where maybe I think that my time isn't correct, and maybe this isn't the right sort of duration for the scene. And I think all of those sort of questions kind of come up, especially in the editing process. And I'm very cognizant of how to make a film, or trying not to make a film that's a derivative of something that I've seen before. So I want to make sure at the end of the day, when I'm approaching the editing process, it is true to the characters, true to the overall film, and it needs to, at the end of the day, also connect and move,
Hi, great job, first of all, it was amazing. What's a lesson that you've learned from this film that you'd like to take on to the next one? You can say more than one if you like.
That is a great question. Can my actors answer that first? I have to think about that. That's a great question.
If I get to do this again. What I will take with me when I really liked working with Connie is, like, we would always talk about what emotion it is beforehand, because there is so much in the script, and there's so much on set, but then there's also even more what I'm feeling inside. And I loved doing that exercise with you. So I think I'm gonna, when I get to do this again, I'm gonna take that with me.
You will.
I'm gonna take that with me, and I'm gonna like approach it in that manner.
I mean, almost like there's always like regrets for each film I made, and then also like because we only shot in 18 days, and sometimes like one scene, one take, and only one time really for just only one take. So there's always regret, but then I felt like, but at the same time I felt like very satisfied because we really put so much heart and effort and everything in this film. Yeah, and so.
I absolutely, I think asking for more time, making sure that that you actually have the scene before you move on is something I always have to remind myself, but sometimes you just can't get it, unfortunately. But right now I'm like writing my second film, and I can already feel like the difference in writing my second film to this one, where like so much more of the characterization of, I think, the actors and also the development of their backstory. Like I think I'd like to be a lot more precise, if that makes sense, in moving in my next script writing, because it is to have a script work on a level where it's furthering the character, it's also moving the plot, but also exist on a level that you're trying to make it transcendental. I think it's very hard, and to create like a situation to have those characters exist is something I'm routinely thinking about and trying to get better at. So that's what I'm thinking about. Thank you.
Right here. I don't know why I said right here, like that's helpful.
This is a kind of a question for everybody, but I think mostly for Constance. This film obviously has some pretty heavy subject matter, but there's also some moments of levity in there, which I think really helped to kind of balance it out and added a lot of nuance and a lot of life into it. So I thought that was very successful, and I just wondered if you could talk about how you managed to strike that balance between the sort of heavy stuff, but also the kind of spice of life and the sort of, not to call it comedy, but the comedy of it. Yeah.
I think that's the beautiful thing about life, that there is moments that are really heavy and tragic, but at the end of the day, like a lot of the characters that are moving within this film are trying to move on, and they're trying to do their best in their own way. And that is oftentimes filled with love and laughter, especially between the two of them. And that was a really important part, I think, of the writing process for me, and also the overall tone that I want to achieve with the film. I don't know. I would, maybe you guys can answer a little bit more about that, especially when we improv. I think some of the scenes where you guys are together and eating.
That's the scenes that we shot. I mean, it's for me, it's really special because I don't know how to describe it, because this is my first time to work with female director, and I really love that when she knows girlhood on set, right? And I mean, when we try to improvise and then something, and she would just say, oh, I love it, it's so cute, and then I can feel, she really understands, how that we are having so much fun. Yeah.
Oh, I love girlhood. I love being a woman, and I think that's so true to the part of what makes it so realistic for me is that's life, right? There's so much complexity, there's tragedy, but whenever there is tragedy, at least in my life, there's always community as well, and I rely on my girls, my community, my people, and that only makes sense to me that there is this balance, because that is what life is like. And I knew I was the comic relief. So I'm really honored to bring that into
We're more than that.
life. Yes.
Hi, thank you for this beautiful film. I guess I'm just curious, how do you come to title the movie Blue Sun Palace? And then the second question is kind of strange, but I'm just curious about the name of the restaurant where they share the spicy chicken.
This was the question I was going to end on.
Was that really? Okay, so this is a great segue then. It is Spicy Village. I have been going there for a very long time, yes. The chicken is actually very delicious.
Not in Flushing.
Not in Flushing. But the title itself was something that I had thought about it in a way that was a lot more instinctual, and I knew that for me, I needed the title to be a place that almost felt like a dream or like a paradise that they would end up in. And so there's so many, I think, beautiful names of Chinese restaurants that sometimes we kind of pass by, and I wanted that to be a sort of ode to that as well. And when Hsieh and I were kind of looking up the title in Chinese to translate it, you found something interesting.
Yeah, it's like blue sun. We don't have the sun with the color blue, but then I found news from China years ago that people actually captured with this one day, suddenly, there's actually blue sun there. But then which to me, it means that something almost so rare, so impossible. And for me, it's like Amy or Chang, they are living here, trying to maybe grab or achieve some dream which might be unreachable. And also, I really love the name of Palace, because for me, Palace is so beautiful and so magnificent. And somehow when I was acting, during those emotional shooting days, I don't know why, but then I was constantly thinking, okay, are they, queens living in the palace? Or sometimes I feel like we are maybe more like prisoners in a cell, or, locked in Queens area like that. So for me, the title of the name really inspires me a lot, and I really love this beautiful title of the film, Busan Palace.
I think we should leave it there for now. But Constance, thank you for this. Thank you for the
guys.
beautiful film.
Thank you guys so much for staying here. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and the film's opening at Metrograph at the end of the month. So if you enjoyed it, tell a friend.
April 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah.